a article by Cybersecurity Dive. And the title here is Security Tool Consolidation Boosts Efficiency and Threat Mitigation. This is a study created by Palo Alto and IBM. Full disclosure, IBM was my former employer. So they threw me out the airlock. Not that I'm bitter or anything.
I mean, you guys did share custody of your son, so
that's very true. It's very true.
You try to remain amicable. For the weekend handoffs. Anyway, sorry, that was not a very well thought out joke. Carry on. So IBM and Palo Alto made this study that, let me guess, reinforces why you should buy IBM and Palo Alto stuff.
And not only that, but only that, right? So the whole idea behind this report is that organizations, and just some of the key bullet points that are that, as an example, organizations use an average of 83 different security tools from 29 different vendors. And the headline of the report is that this creates significant inefficiencies, and one of the proof points that they highlight is that for the organizations that they surveyed, they've got this term called platformization, which is, I think, basically it's consolidation of their security estate or security tool estate. They're saying that for those organizations who have embraced this platformization, it's reduced the amount of time to detect an incident by 74 days on average, and the time to mitigate a security incident by 84 days. So, yeah.
I am skeptical. Carry on.
So, I mean, look, I'll just give you my kind of unvarnished thoughts on this. It's a pretty long report. I've actually downloaded the report, and I'm going to suffer the wrath of IBM and Palo Alto spam just for all of you, because I love you all. The report is, I think it's about 32 pages long. Again, the subtext really is around standardizing on a particular platform, and I think this was definitely something that Palo Alto paid IBM to perform. Now, by the way, Palo Alto and IBM have a very tight and very large and strategic security alliance now. So it's, I don't think that's necessarily coincidental, but I think Palo Alto certainly has a horse in the race of trying to convince customers or prospective customers that you really shouldn't necessarily be shopping around for best of breed in every category. What you really need to be doing is focusing on consolidation and simplification and optimization, and that is where the real benefit to your security operations lie. Now, my take on this, having been a CISO for some period of time, not that I was necessarily a great CISO, but I think that most companies, most IT organizations, kind of all up and down the ladder, I think, have an intuition that this, what they call tool sprawl, is not a great thing, and that creates inefficiencies and whatnot. I don't think that's a novel concept, but at the same time, I think that believing or asserting that there's not a meaningful difference between what we would consider to be a best of breed security tool and what you would typically see as something that's rolled up into a full featured security vendor, I think there's a significant difference in there.
No, Jerry, it checked the box on the RFI. It's the same.
And I also think, furthermore, that it is now again, I'm not that familiar with Palo Alto's stuff, but I am familiar with a lot of organizations who are you have a kind of a similar go-to-market strategy, and the assertion that all of their tools kind of work together seamlessly is a joke, because most of the time they're like a big roll up of all kinds of little components that they've purchased from other companies and done a half-ass job of integrating. And then you as the customer, on paper, when you go to buy it, it looks like you're buying this one thing that you will be, all seamlessly integrated. And then you find out, well, like the Windows version you have to manage with this interface, and the Mac and
Mm-hmm.
Linux version you have this other interface, and if you want to use your firewall you got this other management interface. And there's this I think as a customer you have this belief that I'm buying company X's, maybe X isn't a great one to use right now, company Y's security suite, and therefore it's all seamlessly integrated. I think it's just not reality. And I think,
Mm-mm.
by the way, furthermore, it creates some big problems. And the one I will simply call it the Broadcom problem.
Hmm.
So think about what happens if Broadcom comes along and buys the company who's providing all of your security tools.
Or maybe like VMware as an example, but sure.
Or VMware. Yeah,
Right.
exactly. Exactly. Point is that now you have to not like replace one component in your tool set. Like you have to probably replace the whole tool set, or you're going to be in this unaffordable mess. All that said, I think that the net point is sound, that you really have to find a way to integrate those, and by the way, what that means is going to be very dependent on the organization. And in some
Yeah.
instances it's going to mean that like you're selecting security technology, not only based on like its effectiveness, but also like its ability to be integrated through APIs and whatnot, so that it can feed, it can be managed by the automation system that you've pieced together. So I it's a interesting thing. Now there's, I guess, one other. I know I said there was only one more, but I guess my last thought on this is that I think this whole report seems to be implying that it is tool consolidation, or this platformization, that is driving these efficiencies. And they have lots of fancy charts, and they segment the respondents into quartiles and all kinds of crazy stuff like that. And the implication is very clearly that the the ones who are doing the best are the ones that are platformized, platformatized, however you say that,
Who've adopted their vision.
who adopted their vision. And I
Yeah.
think it's the wrong way around. I think the 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 right way to think about it, I suspect, at least my intuition, is that it's the companies and the organizations and the infosec teams who are the most mature already, who are the ones that have adopted this. And my gut tells me that the mere fact of adopting this strategy isn't going to reduce the amount of time for you to detect a breach or to respond and mitigate a breach. Like, those are attributes of the maturity of your program, and I think your adoption of consistent technology is an artifact of that maturity, not the other way around.
It's a good point. I I've been chomping at the bit to talk about this story. Uh I'm pretty much
Okay.
going to kill any chance Palo Alto and IBM is going to sponsor our show. So just for the record.
Okay.
So for background, I also worked for a number of vendors in sales engineering roles. And I've also been in the industry long enough that we've seen this consolidation cycle happen a couple of times. Computer associates, network associates, who else? We saw a bunch of other roles. I should have done research, and we've seen this
McAfee,
play. McAfee,
Symantec. Yep.
Symantec, very true. Here's how I think this plays out. And I'm just going to say real quick, I call BS on this report entirely because this is a very market sales driven report that's targeted at selling to the executives in their customers.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a very clear reason why they're going down this path. So let's say I'm going to pick on Palo Alto, but I worked for Checkpoint. I saw the same thing at Checkpoint. And I'm probably going to piss off some Checkpoint people when I say this. When you get your core market that you're good at, so let's say it's Palo Alto or Checkpoint and it's firewalls, and you lock that down, you eventually get to a point where you've got as much of that market as you can. You've got the total addressable market, and now you are bumping along at like steady state. Steady state is not acceptable to these companies. They have to grow. They have to increase sales. So the way that these teams look at this is you now have a customer. Okay, you can either be a farmer or you can be a hunter. Hunter means you go find new customers. Farmer is you find more sales in your existing customers. And the way you do that is offer new functionality that comes with a new price point, and you spread laterally throughout the organization. Wiz, who I like, but Wiz is doing this right now, and I'll pick on Wiz a little bit too. They were very, very good at their core, which was analyzing cloud environments for vulnerabilities and misconfigurations and that sort of things. And they've done gangbusters in that market, but now they're getting into Wiz code analysis. They're getting into Wiz defense. They're getting into all these other areas where they're now taking all this success that they've spent and they've made all this money on, and now investing into other areas that they can sell into to get more money from their existing customer base. But this means they're also competing with other vendors who their own core competency is very mature. All right, so let's pick on Wiz again for a minute. And I'm not like picking on one, everybody's doing this, but this is why I think it's BS. Let's say Wiz introduces a static code analysis tool as an example. And they're now competing with existing very mature static code analysis companies. Okay. But they go to your executive, they go to your CISO and say, look, we do static code analysis too. Why do you have a different vendor for that? Oh, we can sell it for 75% of that cost.
Right.
And now it's in one platform. But in general, those version 1, version 2, version 3 are not nearly as mature and flexible and capable as that best of breed vendor. This is my personal opinion, and I've seen it happen over and over again. It takes time for these vendors, whether they go buy or build, to fully integrate and fully realize that. But it looks perfect on a marketing slide. And it looks perfect in their RFIs when they respond, yes, we do that too. And when they're selling to executives, that is the sales tactic they use. And so this report reinforces that sales strategy of you're dumb to not go with a full platform because look how good we are. But when you sell to technical people after actually running it at the low level, actually have to make this stuff work, it's not nearly as good as they make it sound. And I'm biting my tongue a little bit here because I get frustrated with this topic because I've seen this over and over again. And salespeople come in and they try to cross-sell and they try to sow doubt of why are you spending so much money on this other vendor? Because this other vendor is best of breed and I've got it well integrated. Here's the other aspect. The more I use of one particular vendor, the harder it is for me to rip them out to replace them. They want this to be sticky. So the more features I use, the bigger headache it is for me to replace it.
Yeah.
And frankly, I want to be nimble. I want to be able to rip out a vendor I don't like, who pisses me off, or suddenly raises the rates by 20%. So frankly, I think as a non-CISO, but high-level security executive, I want best of breed that directly meets exactly what I need to do the way I needed to do it. Because here's the other problem. My platform vendor has their own view of how they solve the problem. That may not be the way I want to solve the problem. That's why I like competition. Like this vendor has a different view of static code analysis and how they present that information and how they work with it. That may not be the way my platform does it. And now how much inefficiency have I introduced because I'm stuck going down this path that only this one vendor wants me to go down because it may integrate.
Right.
It frustrates me so much. And this is all about, I know you're smiling at me, you're chuckling at me. This is all about these vendors trying to get more addressable market, grow at any cost. And typically, their first couple of versions suck ass, but it's good enough to get them in the door and get them sales opportunities and then continue to iterate and make it better. So if you're got nothing, you're brand new, you've got no stack, maybe it makes sense. But typically, this is a sales technique going at the CEO, CISO, CFO level of efficiency, vendor management, lower cost. It's not, I don't believe the efficacy. I don't. Straight up. Bullshit. I have strong feelings on this topic. I'm sorry.
I would not have guessed that.
This will be a short on YouTube, I'm sure.
You
and
know,
I've heard all of our time for the rest of the show.
It's all good. I agree with a lot of what you said. I think that I guess one thing I will disagree with is I think that sales strategy works better with the CEO and the CFO than it necessarily does with a lot of CIO and CISOs.
Yeah, that's fair. I would agree with that statement. They're more technical typically.
Which, that by the way is IBM's bread and butter. They go after higher level, right? They're not after the technical executives. They're after the business executives. Their business is selling enterprise license agreements, and you don't end up with anything that's fantastic, but you end up with this super expansive suite of kind of mediocre stuff.
Right. Now, that's not to say that some companies don't do this well, right? I've seen some companies who very carefully and thoughtfully expand beyond their core competency, and they do a good job, right? But the Palos and the IBMs of the world, they're growing through acquisition, and I think I can say this now. I think all my NDAs are expired. Checkpoint was doing a bunch of this when I was there too, and they sucked at it. They would try to bolt on something they bought, and it was terrible. And it took them a long time to get better at it, right? But the sales team's out there selling it and being told to sell it, and
and it's the customers that suffer in those instances because you're buying something with an expectation.
My advice is test it well. Don't buy anything without extensive POC. I mean, the other thing is I'm buying into the ecosystem. I'm buying into the future with this company. They're going to partner with me. Okay, unless you're a Fortune 100, that's BS. They don't care what your opinion is. You're not going to drive their roadmap. Sorry. Not in the near term. Not in the time frame that's going to be meaningful for your problem most of the time. Not for these big players. You might get a niche player who absolutely will work with you, but not these big players. Big players don't care.
Which, honestly, that's probably who this report is aimed at, is the Fortune 100.
Yep, absolutely. Anyway, I'm sure I'll get some hate mail on this one.
By the way, I am in the process of reading a book right now. It's called The CISO Evolution. And it is really about the business aspect of being a CISO. And when I read this report, it took me back to a lot of what this particular book is talking about. So if you're not familiar with the book and you're interested in being a CISO, to all those of you out there, I would definitely recommend it. I'm only about halfway through it, and it's I would say it's as much MBA as it is CISO. It's a very interesting book.
What's the book again? CISO Evolution?
Yeah.
Business Knowledge for Cybersecurity?
Yes.
And it is by, I'm looking it up, for Cybersecurity Executives, first edition, by Matthew Sharp, and another name that I will butcher pronouncing, so I'm not going to do it justice. So, CISO Evolution, Business Knowledge for Cybersecurity Executives.
it's a good book, and it
Yeah.
really it really helps. You know, I had a speaking engagement a couple of weeks ago up in Raleigh at a ISACA event, and one of the questions I got was, you know, the age old question about, you know, how do I convince my management team to invest more in security? And this book actually helps you answer that question in meaningful ways, because it and by the way, in some instances it helps you understand why it might not make sense. So I think it's
Well,
good. It gives
take
a
some notes. When
yeah,
you finish it, we'll do a segment on it.
absolutely, absolutely. It's a good book. All right, so sorry for that that digression, but
No, it's all good.